Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking about Operation Wetback and examining the question, how has being Latino in America affected people's economic opportunities? So I just want to start with this quick do now. What is an illegal immigrant? Can human beings be illegal? And how can identifying a group as illegal affect how society at large views that group? So just take a quick second to reflect and pause the video right here. Okay. So, what is an illegal immigrant? An illegal immigrant is defined as a person who has come to typically the United States, is what we think of in American politics, um, and hasn't gone through the legal process of immigration. You know, getting a visa, getting a green card, getting going for citizenship, all of that stuff. Can human beings be illegal? I mean, that's kind of an ethical question, you know. Personally, I don't think anyone can be illegal. We're all people, but um, I think that's a question you really have to self reflect on. Do you think humans can be illegal? How does identifying a group as illegal affect how society at large views that group? I mean, identifying someone as illegal is going to be obviously a negative um, identification on them, and it's going to tell other people that those people aren't good or they aren't deserving of being in the US and that they shouldn't be here and that they should leave. So it's going to have all sorts of negative connotations that are going to make people see the group as a whole negatively, even if the group isn't particularly bad. So today I want to start by talking about the Bracero program. It was a program in place from 1942 to 1964, and it developed from a series of bilateral agreements between Mexico and the US. It allowed millions of Mexican men to come to the US to work, typically in agricultural work, as you can see in this photo on the right. And they usually signed short term agricultural labor contracts and sent money back to their family. Over the course of the program, 4.6 million contracts were signed, and many returned multiple contracts and returned many times to the United States. And it was the largest US contract labor program. So there were many issues with the Bracero program. Many workers weren't given proper paperwork, so they couldn't prove that they were allowed to work or part of the Bracero program. US employers didn't pay Mexican laborers well because they wanted cheap and plentiful labor. Um, so they also circumvented immigration bureaucracy to bring in workers um, without getting the paperwork, which meant that many of them were there illegally, which meant that many of them got deported, and when that happened, their employers did nothing to help them. It encouraged a huge influx of Mexican immigration, which wasn't a bad thing. But the bad thing was that it angered Americans who believed that they were depressing wages, which caused large amounts of racism in the country and caused many racist attacks on Mexican workers. Following the Bracero program, the U.S. government instituted Operation Wetback, which came from the slur wetback, which referred to Mexican immigrants that crossed the Rio Grande in order to enter the U.S. It was put forward by Attorney General Brownell in 1954, and it focused on two initiatives: stemming the flow of illegal and undocumented Mexican workers into the U.S. and discouraging employers who harbored workers. Um, the second initiative was disliked by Congress and the agricultural lobby because they didn't want to give up their free or cheap labor, but they did want to stop Mexican people who were supposedly making the country worse from coming into the country, which really shows that all they cared about was cheap labor and racism. So only the first initiative was passed. This initiative was okayed by President Eisenhower, so it was signed by him, and General Joseph Swing of the U.S. Armed Forces was put in charge of implementing the program. Um, as you can see on the right, this newspaper, the LA Times, is talking about a immigration raid in which 500 immigrants were um, rounded up by quote unquote wetback raiders and um, deported. So, application and consequences of the Operation Wetback program were many consequences. So, during the summer of 1954, 1,074,277 workers were deported to Mexico, where they struggled to find their way home. So, they were dumped on the border and they had to make their way home themselves. Deportees were often forced to leave behind property in the U.S. They were unable to contact family. They were left without food, water, employment, or money in Mexico. Um, and some chronic offenders or just people were beaten or jailed. Um, 88 workers died in the heat during July 1955 because they were kept in cages, as you can see on the right, and driven back to Mexico. And it popularized the wetback slur and increased anti-Mexican sentiment in the U.S. So I just want to end with this quick exit slip. Um, what do you believe that Operation Wetback was motivated by? Why? Does it relate to today's immigration crisis? So just pause the video for a second and think about that. Okay, so I personally believe Operation Wetback was motivated by racism. Their excuse is that Mexican workers were reducing wages, that they were bringing in crime, but it's false. It was motivated by racism because people didn't like that a lot of Mexican immigrants were coming into the country, and they didn't like that, and so they decided to um, send them back to where they thought they came from, back to where they thought they belonged. Um, and it does relate to today's immigration crisis because a lot of the illegal immigrants that people talk about today, um they come here for work. Like, people come here to work. No one's coming here to like traffic drugs. Well, there are people coming, but it's a tiny percentage of people that are coming here to commit crime. Most people come here to build a better life for their family and find work, and that's not something that America should be stopping if we support the American dream as we claim to. So, um, thank you for joining me today. As usual, I'll be linking the primary source document in the description, so take a look at that. I'll see you again later.